Hello, good afternoon. It is Friday, the 8th of April, and because I have been so engrossed and so set on trying to finish off this collection of books, which is the After series by Anna Todd, I completely forgot to fill out my application form to stand for local council for Nuneaton and for the ward Arbury, which would have been where I would have stood and I have stood previously. So I can only apologise if anyone locally has been following me on social media that I haven't filled in the application, just basically for being so busy for the local council. So I can't now apply again for another 2 years. So I can only apologise and say thank you to anyone who has ever voted for me in the past. Now, my aim is to get this book finished by Lent. I also have 2 more books to read. The After We Fell by Anna Todd is actually the longest book in the whole collection. It's also the book where readers find a lot more out about Tessa and Hardin's past. It's also the book that, in my opinion, is probably one of the most difficult to read because of the length, but also because of the contents as well. So on my previous video, I mentioned how finally Hardin and Tess had split up. And the way she dealt with that breakup was by giving back everything he had purchased for her whilst they were together. Now, we then get on to chapter 54, and I thought that maybe Tessa was going to go home to her mother's after she split with Hardin. But instead, she phones up Steph, who, if anyone is aware of, was her roommate at college in the first book. And she goes and stays with Steph. Steph also reminds her that there is going to be a surprise party for her that they've arranged because she's moving to Seattle. Steph as well, she's still with Tristan, who is actually played by a female in the movie and not a male, and she's in this quite loving and secure relationship with this individual. And what people don't know about Steph, sadly, is she has a bit of a dark side to her. All the way through the book so far, bit of a spoiler alert, Molly has been portrayed as being the person that Tessa has a huge issue with. I just want to warn you now that from chapter 54 right through to chapter 63, there is a lot of contents in there that, in my opinion, shouldn't be read by anyone under the age of 14. Yes, I know that people under the age of 18 do drink, they experiment with drugs, alcohol, they may even engage in sexual activities of sorts. But literally chapter 54 all the way through to chapter 63 has a lot of adult contents in it, and in a way I am relieved that Anna Todd did include this information and these, and spoke and wrote about issues that young people do face, and it will kind of educate people and be a little bit more aware as to how people can be or can act, especially when they're under the influence of alcohol or peer pressure or just basically being human. But there's still no excuse for people deliberately and maliciously going out there to hurt somebody else. I don't care how bad your upbringing's been. At the end of the day, you've got to take responsibility, in my opinion, for your own actions. So in chapter 54, Tessa has moved back in with Steph. So it's a bit of a sort of a no chapter, really, to be honest. And chapter 55 is about Hardin and his relationship with his father, and about how he kind of admits to his dad that he does need help and that he is kind of on the verge of becoming a borderline alcoholic. if he hasn't already won already. So that's about him opening up to his dad, telling him his dad and admitting his mistakes, and kind of confiding in his dad as to how he wished he'd been the father he should have been to him, and then maybe his life wouldn't be the way it is today. Chapter 56 is about Tessa and how she starts to go to the party, and she meets Zed there, sorry. And so it is about sort of being at the party and being given one of her favourite drinks, which is cherry vodka. And again, she's kind of in that limbo stage where she doesn't want to tell anyone that she's not with Hardin. They keep asking about him, he's not there. But at the same time, she wants to be able to move on with her life. So this is like trying to wipe the slate clean. One last hurrah, with people that she's probably never going to see again. And then move to Seattle. But what she doesn't realise in chapter 56 is that her drink has actually been spiked by Steph. And it's at that point that you actually realise what Steph's true intentions were all along, to how she really feels about Hardin, how she really feels about Tessa, and how she takes this as sort of like her last opportunity to do something to sort of prove a point that, you mess with me, I'll mess with you. And the way it kind of sort of spirals out of control from chapter 57 to 63 just shows how serious what might be classed as a childish prank can actually have a detrimental effect and a life-changing effect on somebody. So getting back to chapter 57, Hardin finds Tessa's notebook that she's been doing for religious education purposes. She was asked to keep a journal, and that was how the teacher was going to assess them on their views and opinions of religion and how important is religion in today's society. What do you class as faith? What do you class as God? What is the definition of love? And it kind of brings me back to the first movie After, where there is a scene between Hardin and Tess where he's writing in a journal. And I think to myself, you never really know what that is or why he's doing it. It's never been explained so far. And then part of me thinks maybe he did that course. I don't know whether it has briefly been mentioned in the book. If anyone can clarify that for me, that would be great. And maybe that's what he did the year before. So he kept a journal about religion after doing religious studies. And when he's reading what Tess has put down, he notices that it's all about him and how she feels about him in her life. And then all of a sudden on page 392, he has this kind of like revelation. He wants to have a drink. He is itching to have a drink. He takes the vodka. He almost drinks it, but then he tips it down the sink. To me, that sort of shows that he's admitting he has an issue with alcohol and that he's trying to change and start a new life. And then on chapter 58, it is the chapter where Tessa has already been drugged. And it is where Molly, Steph, and Dan decide that they're going to play a prank on her. And reading what they were planning to do to her, it is really, really hard to do. Literally from page 332 right through to page 358, it is all about Steph's sort of intentions to punish Hardin and to punish Tess. And it ends up being Molly who actually comes to Tess's aid, as well as Zed, who basically ends up taking her to her mother's house. And to read the graphic details of what they were going to do to her, to photograph her taking off her clothes, saying how Hardin's going to know what it felt like when Dan's sister was abused by him, because he did that to Dan's sister when he first sort of met her. And he actually apologised to her. The apology did actually take place in the second book, which was After We Collided. So Dan still has a lot of resentment against Hardin, and he is now using that resentment to support Steph in drugging Tess and putting her through this extremely horrific ordeal of giving her benzo. Now, I personally didn't know what benzo was. I had to research it. And basically, it's like a form of antidepressant when mixed with alcohol. The side effects can be quite extreme, to the point that they can last up to 12 hours, if not longer. And it's like having this out-of-body experience. So basically, they roofied her, they drugged her, and have used benzo in a way like a date rape drug. And they don't seem to have any remorse for what they've done. It's like Molly seems to think, well, hang on a minute, okay, I don't like Tessa, she's an absolute, she's been with Hardin, but I'm not going to go out and rape this girl. I'm not going to attack this person physically to the point where, I could probably end up in jail if somebody was to press charges. And luckily, she kind of comes to Tessa's rescue, and Zed walks in, and he is this knight in shining armour, and he saves Tess and takes her home to her mother's house. And all the time he keeps saying to Tessa, I'm going to ring Hardin, I'm going to tell him what's happened. And she's like, no, don't ring him, I don't want him to know. And he eventually finds out, because Molly comes forward and comes clean. So reading all of this and sort of being, again, like a voyeur at the party, witnessing what this person has just gone through, and yet kind of being helpless and knowing there isn't really anything you can do, it's kind of really worrying, because of how easy it is and how often things like this do happen to people. How, people do get drugged when they go out, and they wake up and they don't know what's happened. They aren't sure if anything has happened, because they have no conscious memory of what's actually took place. So that whole ordeal, and how Hardin manages to find out, and he comes to Tess's aid when he finds out she's probably at her mother's, literally takes place, like I said, from page 332 right through to page 350. So if you are reading this book, please be aware that during those pages, you're probably going to find it very difficult to read. And if you've ever experienced anything like that yourself, which I hope you haven't, then again, it can potentially bring back trauma. So it's for that reason that I am sort of doing these videos, to kind of make people aware, because it's not the same as when you watch a movie or you watch a series or documentary. There always seems to be like warning labels on something, like, you know, even if you're watching a Disney cartoon now with your children, it's warning, this may contain violence, this may contain racism, this contains smoking, like in Hercules, where Hades, he lights a cigar. And all these warning labels are now actually on the Disney Channel, with Disney Plus. So before you even watch a Disney movie with your children, it has all these warning labels on it. And I'm thinking, what? That is insane. But everybody's got to the point where they've got to be so politically correct, they've got to use the right terminology. But yet when it comes to reading books, there are no warning labels. There may have been something briefly when the book was reviewed, or it became a #1 bestseller, or, there'll be information like, this is cast as a teen romance. But I haven't done any research to find out what information is out there about the books by Anna Todd. But it doesn't say anything on the back about warnings like this contains adult contents, this talks about rape, this talks about drug abuse, it talks about domestic violence, it talks about alcohol abuse. And yet I know these books were pitched to young people. The same with the films. And I have seen the first movie, and that's the only one I've seen because I live in the UK. And again, even in the movie, yes, there were hints of underage drinking, but as a teen movie and a teen romance, that's the sort of thing you would expect to see in a teen movie. The fact that obviously in the first book it was more sinister than that, the bet that took place between Hardin and Tessa, and his friends knew about it, wasn't in the film. So again, I have to stress, any books like this, if you are an adult or even if you're not an adult and you do consider reading them, please make sure you try and do a bit of research first, because I honestly would say these books, unfortunately, they are not aimed at under 14-year-olds. I don't care what anyone says. That is my opinion. I mean, I actually made a mistake yesterday. Someone asked me how old I was, and I said I'm 45. I'm actually 39. And